Okay, I had somebody on Instagram had an interesting question who was a wrestler before he got into jiu-jitsu, and his question was, what is the main thing that you should try to relearn as someone coming into jiu-jitsu as a student if you come in with a wrestling background? So let's start actually with the converse of that. Let's start with what you're coming in that is going to be beneficial. Okay, so these are the things that you don't want to unlearn. Being able to scramble. That is something that a lot of jiu-jitsu guys have to learn. And I find as a black belt, when I'm rolling with high-level D1, D2 wrestlers, that's one of their strengths, is they're very, very hard to hold down. Now that's going to be something that's going to be a benefit to you when you are still learning the different controlling features of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, especially wearing a gi. Being able to scramble and not staying pinned in one spot is actually quite beneficial in jiu-jitsu as much as wrestling. Although wrestling, obviously, you can't get pinned or you lose, but in jiu-jitsu, you don't want to get pinned or you get submitted. So that's a good thing. Second good thing as a wrestler coming in is going to be you have a phenomenal base. You should, because you're trying your very best not to get taken down, not to get thrown, not to get tripped. That actually helps you when you're on the ground on your knees as well. If you're on top in somebody's closed guard, not being sweepable is a really, really big thing that a lot of new white belts need to get into or figure out how to root themselves to the ground, not be sweepable. So that's a good thing for you. Now, to get to your actual question of what to unlearn, probably the number one thing that I see is wrestlers will give their back in a wrestling situation to prevent the pin. So that's all well and good under those rule sets where you're trying not to get pinned, just go lie down on your belly and not allow your shoulders to get flattened out on the ground. But the moment that you allow somebody even just to see your back in jiu-jitsu, they're going to jump on you like a living backpack and choke the life out of you. So this is something that you're going to have to unlearn for sure, because the last thing that you want in jiu-jitsu is somebody on your back. If you don't know already, the back is the strongest position in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. You do not want somebody there. Darcy Ledrew just jumped in the chat. How's it going, Darcy? He asks, your philosophy on standing, takedowns, and guard pulling. What are your thoughts? Okay, well, this is going to probably, a lot of these questions will depend and be determined on what you're doing jiu-jitsu for, what your focus is. If you are a police officer or a military person, somebody who's using this against people who are trying to fight you for a living or as a job, being on the bottom on the ground out there off the mats is not a good place to be. Okay, even like legendary black belts like Chris Howder will be quoted as saying, never be on the bottom. That's interesting to hear from like a 6th degree black belt who obviously has a very, very well-versed bottom game, which a lot of jiu-jitsu does. But if you are in a self-defense situation, you usually, if not always, want to be on top. And if you're on bottom, you want to get out from under there. So guard pulling, not a good idea in the streets. Big surprise. For takedowns, standing in the sport of jiu-jitsu, I found it most helpful at white and blue belt to have a decent understanding of how to take it to the ground. I found myself at purple belt, everybody started pulling guard on you immediately. So the moment you'd get even into range to grab your first grip, they're underneath you. So the guard pulling game was so strong at that level, and from there up I found that I really didn't even get a chance to use my takedown. So that's a bit of a problem, I think, because for those higher level jiu-jitsu guys, they're just worried about passing the guard, worrying about doing the guard pull. They aren't actually getting the reps in anymore on the takedown. So I would suggest that you try to get those reps for yourself to stay sharp, because that's something that can definitely get rusty. What is your favorite guard game? This is actually, it evolves from time to time. So when I got really into guard, it was a lot of spider stuff because I'm a long, skinny guy, so I'd get spider grips and start extending their arms and hips. But then I'd start to, around the purple belt level, start to diverge into specific open guards like De La Riva, and then especially into lasso guard. I had a lot of experience, or a lot of a good experience with the lasso guard in competition at the purple belt level, as well as sit-up guards, so shin on shin, sitting up. Either of those two I play back and forth with from an open guard quite a lot. Nowadays, I'm actually quite enjoying closed guard and half guard. So those two are quite, although they seem very rudimentary, can be used at a very, very high level. For example, if you look at the recent ADCC in 2019, the number one overarching technical position that people were using different variations of was half guard. And I found that very interesting. That seemed to be the thing everybody was focusing on, was half guard. So there's a lot to be said about that position.